Back in the 90s and 2000s, football was all about running backs. That's changed since then. The likes of Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, and Adrian Peterson are long gone. Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey may have been the last highly sought after running backs of this generation. Now, this is no knock on the running back position. Offenses have just changed, in scheme and in pace. The fullback position is completely gone. They're all now hybrid tight ends, because teams are not just dominating with a dangerous ground and pound run game. Now it's all about quarterback and wide receiver positions. And the growth of the wide receiver position couldn't be more noticeable with the 2022 NFL Draft. A record 6 wide receivers were selected in the first 18 picks on Thursday. But it didn't stop there. In just the first 2 rounds alone, there have been 13 wide receivers selected in the 2022 Draft. That ties the 2020 Draft for the most in NFL history. And while all these receivers were taken, A.J. Brown was moved from the Titans to the Eagles, and Hollywood Brown was moved from Baltimore to Arizona. That makes 2 marquee receivers on new teams, and Deebo Samuel from the Niners is probably next. That's not even including the Tyreek Hill move from Kansas City to Miami. And there are many more examples like it. All these guys want more money, and they're getting it elsewhere. Now, we've seen the growth in the quarterback position. No longer are guys supposed to stand tall in the pocket and only pick defenses apart with their arm. NFL teams want guys who can run and throw, and the people that they're throwing to has proven to be very important. You can win a Super Bowl just because of a wide receiver. Cooper Kupp is a prime example of that. So now the market for receivers has only grown over time, and the demand has only led to increased salaries. Receivers are making quarterback numbers, some even making $30 million a year. There are 5 guys making that much, and 8 others are making nearly $20 million and above. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong. I think all these guys are worth the money. I just want to point out the fact that the phenomenon that's happening is here. Because honestly, I think it's interesting. It used to be just one wide receiver making over $20 million a year, maybe even 2 at a time. Now there are multiple. Who knows how much Megatron, Larry Fitzgerald, and Andre Johnson would have made in this market? Heck, forget them. Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, and Terrell Owens would have enough money to fly over all their destinations and fling out money on the way there. Listen, the average career expectancy for NFL players are 3 years, and running backs have nearly always been on the low end of that. Not because they didn't have talent, but because their body was too beat up to continue. Getting the ball nearly every play and running into 300-pound defensive linemen in games and in practice will do that to you. So teams give wide receivers the money. Rarely will a wide receiver get tackled by a defensive lineman. No, they're going against guys that are usually smaller than they are. The old way of playing football was dangerous and just bad business. Wide receivers are not only going against smaller guys, they can't even be hit without them looking at them. They're called a defenseless receiver if not. Their career expectancy has only risen, and it's done nothing but revolutionize the position. There are hundreds if not thousands of athletes aspiring to be a receiver, and for good reason. NFL teams carry around 6 wide receivers on a roster, just a few behind offensive linemen, which is the most on the offensive side. And with the growing number at the position, there are now many more good wide receivers in the NFL. And so there are also many more great receivers in the NFL. That, along with the growing salary cap, has sparked the wide receiver phenomenon. And they're ready to get paid, and teams are willing to do it. Sometimes you can just see a team's destiny coming. Players start hitting more difficult shots. They start making smarter plays. They start playing better defense as a unit and less as individuals. And you can see other teams struggling more against them. The New Orleans Pelicans look that way to me. The Pelicans, a group littered with players who hadn't even been to the playoffs, battled against the top-ranked team in the NBA and forced the Game 6. Now, a lot changed when Devin Booker got hurt, but you could just start to see a shift in young stars' competitiveness as the series went on. Now, we've seen this before. The Pelicans team can be compared to the 2009-2010 OKC Thunder. The Thunder pushed the top-ranked Lakers in their first playoff appearance to a 6-game series. Now, the Pelicans don't have the talent level of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, so don't get me wrong there. But they do have team depth, 2 reliable stars, and a third who may be the best of them all waiting to come back from injury. The Pelicans entered the playoffs 10 games under 500. Now, naturally, you might think, 10 games under 500, it sounds like this team just overachieved. What are you talking about? Well, for most of the year, the Pelicans were just led by Brandon Ingram, and their record suffered with just one young star heading the competition. They started the season 1-12, But then at the trade deadline, everything changed. The Pelicans got CJ McCollum, and they no longer were that losing team. We all knew how good CJ McCollum was and is. We've seen him in the Western Conference Finals before with Portland. But his addition went further than I initially thought it would. With 2 stars, this group gained more confidence, and that allowed them to rally past the Spurs and the Clippers in the play-in games. And the Pelicans were slated against the Suns. But New Orleans didn't back down in the playoffs. They even stole 2 games, one on the road, and it took historic games by Chris Paul to beat the Pelicans in the playoffs. And he did again in the closeout Game 6, where the Pelicans momentarily looked to have the Suns on the ropes. Paul set another NBA record by making all 14 of his shots from the floor, something that hadn't been done since Wilt Chamberlain did it many decades ago. But even withstanding Paul's performance, the Pelicans only trailed by 3 points in the final minute, and they made all the right plays. They fouled when they needed to, they scored at the rim when they needed to, they just couldn't get that final 3-pointer to fall. So they were just 2 possessions away from a Game 7 with the best team in the NBA. And it wasn't all Ingram and McCollum. The Pelicans have a great rookie class. This season, only 4 rookies played 100 or more minutes during the first round. The Pelicans had 3 of the 4, Alvarado, Herb Jones, and Trey Murphy. They all stepped up when they were needed the most. And to have rookies do what they did in that series against the best team is not normal. And their confidence has to be sky high. And now they have another offseason to get even better. And their youth gets even better for the Pelicans. Of the 10 Pelicans players who played 50 or more minutes in this series, 6 are 24 years old and younger. And that doesn't include Zion Williamson or Kyra Lewis Jr., who are both injured. And of those 10 players, Jackson Hayes is the only contract the Pelicans have to worry about this offseason. I mean, it couldn't be a better situation. With Coach Willie Green and a young group of stars, the Pelicans have laid the foundation of a team that is primed to make a lot of noise in years to come. And as long as they can keep this group together, I, for one, am already a believer. You know, in order to win an NBA championship, you have to have everything go right. You have to get the right matchups. You have to have your stars play to their standards, or even higher sometimes. You have to have a few calls go your way. But at the bare minimum, you have to have a healthy roster. And for the Bucks, that doesn't look like it'll be the case this year. The Bucks' second leading scorer, Khris Middleton, is now expected to miss the entire second round because of a sprained MCL on his left knee. And now, the defending champs will have to play a Boston Celtics team that enters the series as one of the hottest teams in the league. Now granted, the Bucks swept the Bulls 3-0 after Middleton went down, thanks to Grayson Allen playing out of his mind. But the Boston Celtics team is not the Chicago Bulls. They're much more talented, a lot more healthier, and way better defensively. The Celtics aren't a team having its first great run in the past few years. The Celtics, led by Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart, have been to multiple conference finals together. And that has only fueled their hunger to want to finally win a championship with this group. I mean, that couldn't have been more noticeable when the Celtics swept the Brooklyn Nets, led by KD and Kyrie Irving. Let me run you by that again. They swept them 4-0, a team with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, who have been dubbed as the most talented duo of this generation. Now, whether you believe that or not is up to you, but I say all that to say this. The Bucks have a lot going against them in this series, and their current roster situation brings up a lot of questions. For instance, will Giannis be able to take over this series? I like to think so, but Kevin Durant couldn't against this same Celtics team. Can Drew Holiday slow down Jaylen Brown? I mean, he's known as a lockdown defender, but Brown isn't the only Boston star, so the Celtics could just play away from him. Will Grayson Allen be able to consistently score more than 20 points a night? He just scored 27 points against the Bulls for his playoff career high. But can he keep up that production with multiple defensive stoppers on the other end? Look, last year the Bucks overcame a Giannis injury, so this series isn't already decided. The Bucks have a deep team and a team that knows how to win. They've also shown they know how to make adjustments at the right time. Remember, they were down 2-0 against the Suns in the finals last year before sweeping their way to the championship. They can handle adversity, they can handle the moment, but can they handle the Celtics defense with a man down? You could argue this will be the biggest challenge the Bucks have faced in the past 2 years. Giannis didn't miss an entire series when he got hurt last year, only a few games. They were playing a young Hawks team that also was battling injuries. Khris has already missed 3 games and a half, and he's now slated to miss even more time. Listen, he was one of 17 NBA players to average at least 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. And only 44% of his shots were assisted. So he's not only putting up big numbers, he's creating the opportunities for himself. That's a lot of production for any team to miss. The Boston Celtics are experienced, hungry, and one of the most well-coached teams in the NBA. And Jason Tatum seems to be making his leap into stardom. Look, my pick to win the NBA championship before the playoffs was the Bucks, but I think it's safe to say they're going to have a much more difficult time this time. Thanks for watching this video. If you made it this far, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, I have a podcast called Rip Jersey. Follow that, add it to your playlist, listen to it wherever you can. Thanks for watching again.